Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The following content explores historical journalistic coverage of public figures, political leaders, and their marital separations within the United States. This analysis is presented strictly for educational, historical, and media literacy purposes. It does not constitute legal, psychological, family law, or professional relational advice. The historical records, newspaper archives, court transcripts, and case studies discussed herein reflect past media landscapes, evolving societal norms, and specific legal frameworks of their respective eras. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence, cross-reference historical sources, and consult qualified legal or professionals regarding modern family law and privacy matters. In the blistering summer of 1828, a single newspaper article forever altered the landscape of American politics, weaponizing the most private sanctity of human life for public consumption. The Cincinnati Gazette published a scathing editorial that did not attack a politician's economic platform or foreign policy views, but instead targeted the validity of his marriage. The publication asked a devastating question to the American electorate: should a woman convicted of adultery and bigamy sit in the White House? This was the reality facing Rachel Jackson, wife of presidential candidate Andrew Jackson, as the partisan press of the 19th century realized that nothing sold papers, captured eyeballs, or destroyed political trajectories quite like the anatomy of a broken marriage. Decades before the advent of the modern internet, supermarket tabloids, or 24-hour cable news networks, the architecture of American journalism was already being fundamentally reshaped by the commodification of public divorces. When we look at the sensationalized headlines of the modern era, we are not witnessing a new cultural phenomenon, but rather the highly evolved, technologically accelerated iteration of a journalistic playbook that is nearly 2 centuries old. The public dismantling of a high-profile relationship has consistently served as a mirror for American societal anxieties, a tool for political assassination, and a highly lucrative engine for media empires. To truly understand how historical trends in journalism have utilized the private lives of public figures, one must dissect the specific case studies where the court of public opinion collided with the court of law. Consider the structural mechanics of the 1828 Jackson campaign. The journalism of this era was unapologetically partisan, funded directly by political factions rather than independent advertising revenue. Editors like Charles Hammond of the Cincinnati Gazette meticulously unearthed legal documents from the late 1790s, discovering that Rachel Jackson had married Andrew Jackson under the mistaken belief that her first husband, Louis Robards, had completed their divorce proceedings. In reality, the legal dissolution of the marriage had not been finalized, leaving a technical window of bigamy that the press exploited with calculated precision. The journalistic strategy was deliberate: transform a complex, administrative frontier legal error into a profound moral crisis that threatened the fabric of the Republic. The papers printed vivid narratives depicting the couple as morally unfit for leadership, establishing a precedent that a public figure's domestic life was fair game for public dissection. The psychological toll of this journalistic onslaught was immense, culminating in Rachel Jackson's untimely death just days before her husband's inauguration, a tragedy that Andrew Jackson directly attributed to the vitriol of the hostile press. As American journalism transitioned into the late 19th century, the emergence of the penny press and yellow journalism shifted the economic incentives of newsrooms. No longer dependent solely on political subsidies, newspapers needed mass circulation to attract commercial advertisers, and nothing drove circulation faster than scandal. The 1875 adultery trial of Henry Ward Beecher, a celebrity minister and public figure of immense national stature, became a watershed moment for historical journalism. Theodore Tilton, a prominent editor, sued Beecher for alienation of his wife's affections, resulting in a sensational legal battle that dominated the front pages of papers like the New York Graphic and the New York Herald for 6 consecutive months. Journalism during this period evolved from mere editorial commentary into a hyper-detailed, industrial-scale transmission of private correspondence, courtroom transcripts, and intimate testimonies. Newspapers published complete legal briefs, verbatim dialogue from the cross-examinations, and intricate diagrams of the residential spaces where the alleged infidelities occurred. The case study of the Beecher-Tilton trial demonstrates a critical pivot point where the press realized that public figures in the midst of domestic collapse could be converted into daily serialized entertainment, maximizing daily street corner sales and establishing the foundational elements of modern sensationalism. Moving into the mid-20th century, the journalistic framework surrounding public figures underwent another tectonic shift, as the boundaries between political reporting and gossip journalism began to blur. For decades, an unwritten code of gentlemen's agreements existed between Washington journalists and political figures, ensuring that private infidelities and marital discord were largely kept out of mainstream broadsheets. However, the 1962 divorce of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller from his wife of more than 30 years, Mary Todd Hunter Clark, shattered this barrier and revealed the potential outcomes of shifting media norms. Rockefeller was a leading contender for the 1964 Republican presidential nomination, but his subsequent remarriage to Margaretta Happy Murphy, a woman who had also recently divorced and relinquished custody of her children, triggered a journalistic feeding frenzy. The mainstream press, realizing the profound cultural shifts occurring in the early 1960s, analyzed the divorce not merely as a personal event, but as a referendum on the changing definition of the American family. The coverage was exhaustive, dissecting the psychological motivations of the parties involved, the legal mechanics of securing a rapid divorce in Reno, Nevada, and the potential political liabilities for the Rockefeller campaign. This historical case study marks the moment where the traditional broadsheet press abandoned its policy of elite protectionism, recognizing that the public demanded transparency into the domestic stability of those who sought the highest offices in the land. The evolution reached its peak in the late 20th century with the hyper-commercialization of the tabloid wars, most notably exemplified by the 1990 divorce of Donald and Ivana Trump. This event transformed the New York print media landscape into a gladiatorial arena where the New York Post and the New York Daily News competed for exclusive access, leaked documents, and provocative quotes. The journalistic methods deployed during this era showcased a highly coordinated system of strategic leaks, public relations manipulation, and narrative framing. The press was no longer just reporting on a legal dissolution. They were active participants in a manufactured media spectacle where each party utilized journalists as proxies to influence public opinion, protect corporate brands, and gain leverage in ongoing asset distribution negotiations. This historical period solidifies the understanding that a public divorce is often managed as a sophisticated public relations campaign, where the media serves as both the weapon and the battlefield. Analyzing these historical trends provides a vital framework for navigating the contemporary media ecosystem. The fundamental problem facing audiences today is the inability to distinguish between objective investigative reporting, strategic public relations leaks, and algorithmically driven sensationalism. When a high-profile separation dominates modern digital feeds, viewers are frequently overwhelmed by a deluge of fragmented information, emotional bias, and conflicting narratives. By studying the historical trajectory of how U.S. journalism has treated the private collapses of public figures, audiences can develop the critical media literacy skills required to look past the immediate emotional hook of a headline and identify the underlying structural mechanics at play. This analytical approach solves the problem of media vulnerability, empowering individuals to recognize the historical continuity of narrative framing, the economic incentives of the publishers, and the strategic legal maneuvers that shape the information they consume daily. Throughout this 10-part masterclass, we will systematically deconstruct the evolution of public marital analysis within American journalism. We will examine the transition from the highly partisan broadsheets of the 19th century to the sensationalized court reporting of the Gilded Age. We will analyze the impact of the mid-century gossip columns, the rise of the supermarket tabloid, and the eventual migration of public figure scrutiny into the digital algorithmic landscape of the 21st century. By exploring these distinct historical eras through deep-dive case studies, specific media data, and step-by-step breakdowns of journalistic methodologies, this series will equip you with a sophisticated framework to decode public narratives, understand the intersection of law and media, and critically evaluate how the press utilizes private tragedy to shape public discourse. Let us begin this investigative journey by looking deeper into the structural mechanics of the 19th century partisan press. To comprehend the true structural mechanics of this 19th century system, we must first dismantle the modern assumption that historical journalism was inherently more restrained or ethical than the digital media landscape of 2026. In reality, the financial and operational frameworks of early American print shops created an environment perfectly optimized for aggressive personal exposure. Newspapers during this era were not independent commercial entities driven by objective reporting. They were official organs of political parties, directly funded by government printing contracts, postmaster appointments, and wealthy party patrons. If an editor did not successfully neutralize the opposition, their publication faced immediate financial liquidation. This existential pressure meant that public figures and their marital choices were viewed as high-yield strategic targets. Imagine if a modern citizen in 2026 woke up to find that a public official's marital breakdown was not just a passing digital headline, but a weaponized multi-week narrative printed on heavy rag paper, delivered via horseback to every tavern and post office across the country. In that era, there was no concept of a separate private life for those in power. The home was seen as the foundational proving ground for public leadership, and any crack in that domestic foundation was treated as a systemic failure of character. To understand how a public figure's marriage was legally and journalistically dismantled in the early to mid-19th century, one must examine the step-by-step process of legislative divorce. Prior to the widespread adoption of judicial divorce systems, where independent courts handled marital dissolution based on established statutory laws, the primary mechanism for ending a marriage in many states was an act of the state legislature. This required an individual to submit a formal written petition directly to the legislative body, outlining their grievances in vivid detail, whether alleging desertion, cruelty, or infidelity. Think about the strategic vulnerability this created for any prominent individual. A public figure's deepest personal miseries were introduced as a literal bill on the legislative floor, debated by political rivals, and entered permanently into the public record. Partisan editors sat directly in the legislative galleries, meticulously transcribing every accusation, every emotional outburst, and every piece of entered evidence. They did not just report the facts. They framed these legal petitions to maximize political damage. If a candidate's political ally filed for separation, opposition papers would print the entire petition verbatim on the front page, surrounding it with editorial commentary that questioned the moral integrity of the entire political faction. A primary historical trend of this dynamic is the Eaton Affair, also known as the Petticoat Affair, which effectively paralyzed the federal government between 1829 and 1831. The controversy centered around Margaret Peggy O'Neill, the daughter of a Washington tavern keeper, who married John Eaton, the Secretary of War and a close confidant of Andrew Jackson. Margaret's first husband had died at sea, and rumors swirled through Washington that he had committed suicide after discovering her alleged infidelity with Eaton. The partisan press seized upon this marital timeline with predatory precision. The journalistic strategy was not based on direct investigative journalism as it is understood today, but rather on the strategic amplification of social ostracization. Newspapers aligned with Vice President John C. Calhoun, such as the United States Telegraph edited by Duff Green, printed veiled insinuations about Margaret's virtue, while Jackson-aligned papers, like the Washington Globe edited by Francis Preston Blair, published fierce defenses of her honor. This was not a minor societal dispute. It was a media-driven operational crisis that resulted in the mass resignation of Jackson's entire cabinet. The press utilized a highly sophisticated network of anonymous correspondents, who wrote letters under classical pseudonyms, allowing them to publish damaging rumors about the Eaton marriage without facing libel lawsuits. This methodology allowed newspapers to maintain a veneer of elite intellectualism, while simultaneously delivering highly sensationalized, destructive content to the public. To understand how these narratives achieved massive reach without modern technology, we must examine the postal exchange system established by the Post Office Act of 1792. This law allowed newspaper editors to mail copies of their papers to other editors across the country completely free of charge. This created a primitive but highly effective network for content syndication. When an opposition paper in Washington or New York published a damaging story about a public figure's domestic life, editors in Ohio, Kentucky, and Massachusetts would immediately clip the article and reprint it in their local editions. Within a matter of weeks, a localized marital scandal became a national narrative. The potential outcomes of this syndication network were devastating for public figures, who found themselves fighting a decentralized media war across multiple frontiers simultaneously. The lack of rapid communication meant that a public figure could not quickly issue a counterstatement. By the time their denial reached a distant state, the original scandalous narrative had already hardened in the minds of the electorate. As the 1830s progressed into the 1840s, the financial mechanics began to shift with the birth of the penny press, pioneering an era where newspapers were sold for a single cent on street corners rather than through expensive annual subscriptions. This shift altered the journalistic playbook entirely. Editors like James Gordon Bennett Sr. of the New York Herald realized that to sustain a mass-market business model, they needed to appeal to the working class, and nothing appealed more than the systematic demystification of the wealthy elite. The press began to actively track the marital discord of prominent business leaders, old money families, and civic figures, transforming the legal proceedings of divorce into daily serialized narratives. Journalists no longer waited for legislative transcripts. They began interviewing domestic servants, tracking carriages, and waiting outside courthouse doors to intercept legal clerks. This marked the transition of American journalism from a purely political weapon into a commercial entertainment industry centered around the exposure of private vulnerability. Case studies from this era show that the layout of the newspapers themselves changed, moving scandalous marital updates from the back pages to prominent front page positions, complete with dramatic headlines designed to catch the eyes of passersby. The mechanics of the penny press set the stage for an even more radical transformation in the wake of technological advancement. The introduction of the telegraph and the rapid expansion of urban centers created an insatiable demand for immediate, unfiltered access to the private chambers of the elite. But what happened when these commercial newsrooms stopped just reporting on the legal documents and began actively invading the physical spaces of public figures? What occurred when journalists realized they could increase circulation tenfold by turning a courtroom into a theatrical stage, manipulating the testimonies of distraught spouses for maximum dramatic effect? In the next part of this masterclass, we will step directly into the gilded courtrooms of the late 19th century to analyze the industrialization of scandal, where the line between journalist and prosecutor was permanently erased, and where a single leaked document could bring down the most powerful religious and political empires in America. To understand the industrialization of scandal in the Gilded Age, one must examine the physical and financial evolution of the newsroom during the late 19th century. The invention of the Hohe-perfecting press allowed newspapers to print tens of thousands of copies per hour on continuous rolls of paper, drastically reducing production costs while demanding an unprecedented volume of fresh, sensational content to keep the machines running. At the same exact time, the expansion of the Western Union Telegraph Network turned localized court disputes into instantaneous national spectacles. If a prominent public figure filed for divorce in New York, the details were no longer confined to Manhattan. Within minutes, the telegraph lines carried the verbatim transcripts to newsrooms in Chicago, San Francisco, and New Orleans. This technological infrastructure created a new breed of journalist, the investigative courtroom reporter who operated less like an objective observer and more like an aggressive bounty hunter. These reporters did not merely sit in the public gallery. They actively collaborated with lawyers, paid off courthouse clerks for early access to sealed depositions, and intercepted witnesses before they could reach the stand. A primary historical trend of this dynamic can be found in the explicit journalistic tactics deployed during the high society divorces of the late 1800s. Editors realized that the public was no longer satisfied with dry summaries of legal motions. They wanted the raw, unedited architecture of domestic collapse. Imagine if in the current year of 2026, a prominent tech executive named John Doe decided to dissolve his marriage, and instead of a private mediation, every encrypted text message, private financial ledger, and confidential security feed was intercepted by competing media conglomerates and plastered across giant public video walls within 30 minutes of being generated. That is precisely what the Gilded Age elite experienced relative to the technology of their time. The absolute lack of privacy laws meant that once a divorce petition was filed, it became public property, and the press treated it as an unmined gold field. Let us dissect the step-by-step journalistic execution of the 1895 Vanderbilt divorce case study, an event that permanently altered how the American press handled the marital journeys of the ultra-wealthy. Alva Vanderbilt filed for divorce from William Kissam Vanderbilt, an heir to one of the largest fortunes in human history. In the decades prior, a family of such immense economic power could have easily pressured publishers to suppress the story. However, by 1895, the circulation wars between Joseph Pulitzer's New York World and William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal had reached a fever pitch. The Vanderbilt divorce was not just a news story. It was the ultimate weapon for market dominance. The journalistic playbook for the Vanderbilt case was executed with military precision. First, newsrooms deployed specialized teams of reporters known as the Society Beat, who spent weeks cultivating relationships with the Vanderbilt's domestic staff. Carriage drivers, cooks, and maids were offered sums of money equivalent to a year's wages in exchange for diaries, discarded letters, or confirmations of marital infidelity. Second, because cameras were not yet sophisticated or legally permitted inside courtrooms, newspapers hired specialized courtroom sketch artists tasked with capturing the precise physical manifestations of emotional trauma. If Alva Vanderbilt lowered her veil or William Vanderbilt flinched during testimony, these movements were translated into dramatic, heavily stylized line drawings that occupied the front pages of the evening editions. Data from this specific period indicates that during the height of the Vanderbilt coverage, daily newspaper circulation in New York City spiked by an estimated 15 to 20%, proving the direct financial correlation between private misery and media profit. The potential outcomes of this hyper-focused coverage were calculated to maximize public outrage and fascination. The press framed the Vanderbilt divorce as a moral cross-examination of the entire capitalist elite. Editors printed detailed breakdowns of the family's expenditures alongside the sordid details of William's alleged infidelities in Paris, juxtaposing immense wealth with moral bankruptcy. This narrative strategy allowed newspapers to justify their invasive coverage under the guise of public interest and moral stewardship. They argued that if these individuals possessed such a disproportionate share of the nation's wealth, the public had a democratic right to know if their domestic lives were structurally corrupt. Furthermore, the legal architecture of the era actively fed the journalistic machine. In New York State, the only legal ground for an absolute divorce was adultery, a statutory requirement that forced plaintiffs to present explicit, undeniable proof of physical infidelity in open court. This meant that every single high society divorce trial inevitably featured testimonies from private detectives, hotel clerks, and eyewitnesses describing intimate encounters in explicit detail. Journalistic standards evolved to print these testimonies with minimal censorship. Newspapers utilized a technique called the running transcript, where columns of text were arranged chronologically, allowing the reader to experience the trial in real time, matching the pacing of a theatrical play. To understand the mechanical speed of this system, consider the step-by-step workflow of a Gilded Age trial transmission. A reporter sitting at the press table inside the courtroom would write down the testimony longhand on sheets of carbon paper. Every 10 minutes, a messenger boy would grab these sheets and sprint down to the basement of the courthouse, where a Western Union telegraph operator had established a direct line to the newspaper's main printing plant. The operator tapped out the text in Morse code. At the printing plant, a telegraph receiver transcribed the code back into English text, passing it directly to a linotype operator, who cast the words into lead type blocks. Within 2 hours of a witness speaking in scandalous line on the stand, that exact sentence was printed on newsprint and being shouted by newsboys on the streets outside the courthouse. This industrialization of scandal had a profound cascading impact on the American legal system itself. Realizing that the press could weaponize any public filing, wealthy individuals began seeking alternative legal jurisdictions to dissolve their marriages quietly, giving rise to the early iterations of migratory divorce. States like South Dakota and later Nevada recognized the immense economic potential of offering rapid, low-scrutiny divorces with shorter residency requirements and sealed record options. The press responded to this legal shift by establishing permanent bureaus in these divorce colonies. Reporters were stationed at Western train stations to catalog which public figures were stepping off the trains, effectively creating an early warning system for impending marital collapses. The structural reality of this era proves that the modern media's obsession with public breakups is not a modern deviation, but a direct continuation of a highly profitable commercial system perfected over a century ago. The Gilded Age press proved that private agony could be industrialized, standardized, and monetized on a scale never before imagined. They established the precise mechanisms of sourcing, framing, and syndication that define the media landscape we navigate today. But as the 19th century drew to a close, a new technological disruption was quietly taking shape in the laboratories of media innovators. The written word and the hand-drawn sketch were about to face a competitor that would render them obsolete, stripping away the final layers of privacy that public figures possessed. What happened when the press stopped relying on the testimonies of bribed servants and started using the undeniable, unblinking eye of the camera lens? What occurred when journalism shifted from describing the scandal to visually capturing the exact moment of confrontation? In the next part of this masterclass, we will enter the Roaring Twenties and the birth of the tabloid era, where we will analyze how the invention of the flashbulb and the halftone printing process transformed public divorces into a visual bloodsport, forever changing the psychological price of fame in America. The transition into the 1920s marked a profound transformation in the physical vehicle of news delivery, shifting from the traditional, text-heavy broadsheets to the radical, image-dominated format of the tabloid. The launch of the Illustrated Daily News in 1919 by Joseph Medill Patterson served as the structural blueprint for this new era of jazz journalism. Tabloids were specifically engineered for the fast-paced lifestyle of urban commuters, featuring a half-page size that was easily readable on crowded subways. More importantly, These publications were built entirely around the maturity of the halftone printing process. This mechanical innovation allowed high-contrast photographs to be etched onto zinc plates and printed rapidly on high-speed rotary presses using cheap newsprint. For the first time in historical trends, a public figure's marital dissolution was no longer a narrative to be imagined by the reader. It was a highly explicit visual commodity designed for instant psychological consumption. Simultaneously, the development of the handheld Graflex camera and the widespread adoption of magnesium flash powder fundamentally altered the physical safety of public figures. Journalists were no longer tethered to courtroom press tables or dependent on official transcripts. Armed with portable, fast shutter cameras, photographers could now track individuals through the streets, waiting outside residences, restaurants, and legal offices. The ignition of magnesium flash powder produced a blinding, explosive burst of light and a cloud of white smoke, transforming the act of news gathering into an aggressive, confrontational physical intervention. Public figures navigating a divorce journey were subjected to an unprecedented level of surveillance, where a single caught expression of grief, anger, or exhaustion could be captured instantly and reproduced on hundreds of thousands of front pages within hours. Imagine a scenario in the current year of 2026 where an influential public leader, let us call him Alex Smith, undergoes a highly contentious legal separation. Instead of modern digital paparazzi tracking his movements via GPS and drones, imagine if competing digital media outlets began utilizing early-stage generative artificial intelligence to assemble completely synthetic visual depictions of private bedroom arguments, presenting these fabricated images on mainstream news feeds as authentic historical documentation of the marital collapse. This level of synthetic visual intrusion is the precise 2026 equivalent to what the print tabloids unleashed upon the American public in the mid-1920s through the invention and systematic deployment of the composograph. To understand the operational mechanics of this visual manipulation, one must analyze the 1826 and 1927 case studies involving the real estate multimillionaire Edward West Daddy Browning and his 15-year-old wife, Frances Peaches Heenan. When their highly unconventional marriage fractured after mere months, the resulting separation lawsuit became an absolute obsession for the New York Evening Graphic, a tabloid edited by the pioneer of sensationalism, Émile Gavreau. Because the presiding judge barred cameras from the courtroom to preserve a modicum of judicial decency, the Graphic faced an existential operational challenge: how to provide a visually ravenous public with images of a trial that was legally shielded from the camera lens. The art director of the Graphic, Harry Grosjean, solved this problem by inventing the composograph, a step-by-step method of photographic manipulation that serves as the direct ancestor of modern digital altering techniques. The execution of a composograph followed a strict production workflow. First, Grosjean would orchestrate a staged reconstruction inside the newspaper's studio, utilizing staff writers or professional actors to pose as the individuals involved in the trial. These actors were placed in highly dramatic, scandalous, or compromising positions that mirrored the daily courtroom testimonies. A photographer would capture this staged scene. Next, darkroom technicians would take authentic, legally obtained photographs of the public figures' faces, meticulously cut them out using fine shears, and paste them over the faces of the actors on the master print. The composite image was then airbrushed to smooth out the jagged edges, re-photographed to create a unified negative, and sent directly to the engraving room for immediate print production. The Graphic executed this technique with devastating effect during the Browning trial. They published a massive front-page composograph depicting a simulated bedroom confrontation, showing an actor representing Daddy Browning in silk pajamas screaming at a terrified actress representing Peaches, while a stuffed, honking goose was digitally superimposed into the corner of the frame to symbolize a bizarre inside joke revealed during the testimony. This fabricated image was presented to the public not as a literal photograph, but as an illustrative recreation of reality. The potential outcomes of this journalistic methodology were massive. It drove the daily circulation of the New York Evening Graphic past 300,000 copies, demonstrating that the historical trends of mass media were completely decoupled from traditional notions of objective truth when a public figure's domestic trauma could be successfully commercialized. To further analyze the depth of this era's journalistic aggressiveness, consider the 1925 case study of the Leonard Kipp Rhinelander divorce trial. Rhinelander, an heir to an immense New York real estate fortune and a member of the social elite, sued his wife, Alice Jones, for an annulment, claiming that she had intentionally deceived him regarding her multiracial heritage. The tabloid press seized upon this case, transforming a private matrimonial dispute into an aggressive, daily cross-examination of American racial anxieties, class privilege, and legal definitions of identity. The journalistic coverage was relentless, with papers like the New York Daily News dedicating multiple pages to the verbatim printing of intimate love letters exchanged between the couple. The climax of the journalistic exploitation occurred when the trial moved into a closed-door session, during which Alice Jones was ordered by the court to partially disrobe, so that the jury could visually evaluate her skin color. While the press was barred from photographing this literal legal degradation, the tabloids compensated by printing extraordinarily detailed, voyeuristic textual descriptions of the closed-door proceedings, combined with highly stylized front-page illustrations that stretched the boundaries of contemporary obscenity laws. The Rhinelander case study highlights how historical journalism in the 1920s utilized the legal mechanics of divorce to lay bare the most deeply hidden hypocrisies of the American elite, using the visual power of the tabloid format to enforce societal hierarchies while generating immense corporate profits. The structural impact of this jazz journalism era established the permanent infrastructure of the modern paparazzi ecosystem. Public figures quickly realized that the legal framework of the United States offered almost no protection against the commercial exploitation of their private likenesses. Once a domestic dispute entered the judicial record, the traditional boundaries of privacy were completely dismantled by the combination of halftone printing, portable flash photography, and the editorial willingness to fabricate visual narratives. But as the 1920s came to a sudden catastrophic end with the onset of the Great Depression, the centers of media power and public fascination began to migrate away from the old money dynasties of New York and toward a new corporate-controlled landscape on the West Coast. What happened when the unregulated, chaotic tabloid methods of the urban press collided with the highly organized, multi-million-dollar studio systems of early Hollywood? How did the entertainment industry construct a completely new, weaponized network of syndicated gossip columnists to intentionally manipulate, suppress, or accelerate the public divorce journeys of the silver screen icons to protect corporate assets? In the next part of this masterclass, we will journey into the golden age of Hollywood journalism, analyzing the rise of the studio system contracts and the terrifying power of monopolized gossip networks that could create or destroy an international public figure with a single line of type. To understand how this Hollywood machine operated, we must first analyze the structural reality of the studio system that dominated American media from the early 1930s through the late 1950s. The major film studios, including Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Paramount, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, and RKO, functioned as absolute monopolies. They did not just produce films. They owned the talent through binding 7-year option contracts, they controlled the distribution networks, and they owned the actual theater chains where the films were screened. Within this highly integrated corporate structure, a star's public persona was not a private identity, but a multi-million-dollar corporate asset. The legal department of each studio inserted strict morality clauses into these contracts, which granted executives the unilateral right to terminate an actor's employment and cancel their salary if the individual engaged in behavior that brought public disrepute, contempt, or scandal. Because a messy public divorce journey was viewed as a direct threat to the box office viability of a star, studio publicists developed a highly sophisticated, step-by-step operational playbook to control historical trends in journalism. The newsroom was no longer an independent adversary. It was an extension of the studio's marketing department. At the center of this ecosystem was the studio publicity chief, exemplified by figures like Howard Strickling at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Strickling managed a team of internal investigators, publicists, and fixers who worked 24 hours a day to intercept marital discord before it could reach the mainstream press. Imagine a scenario in the current year of 2026 where a massive digital streaming conglomerate completely owns the biometric data, social media feeds, and virtual reality avatars of a prominent influencer. Let us call him John Starr. If John Starr experiences a sudden marital breakdown, the conglomerate's automated reputation management algorithms would immediately scrub his digital footprint, manipulate search engine results, and feed optimized, synthetic narratives to specific tech journalists to protect their subscription revenue. This level of total narrative containment is the precise 2026 equivalent of what Hollywood publicity departments achieved through manual typewriters, physical wire services, and monopolized gossip columns during the Golden Age. To understand the precise execution of this system, one must analyze the dual monopoly of Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper, two syndicated gossip columnists whose daily writings reached an estimated combined audience of 75 million Americans. Parsons, writing for the Hearst newspaper empire, and Hopper, writing for the Los Angeles Times Syndicate, possessed the unilateral power to validate or destroy an individual's career with a single line of print. The studios maintained control over these journalists through a calculated system of transaction and leverage. If a major public figure was entering a volatile divorce journey, the studio publicity chief would not attempt to hide the story indefinitely. Instead, they would execute a controlled leak. They would offer the exclusive details of the separation to either Parsons or Hopper, effectively buying their editorial loyalty and ensuring that the final published article adhered strictly to the studio's preferred narrative framing. Let us dissect the step-by-step journalistic execution of a managed Hollywood divorce through the case studies of the era. Step 1 was the containment phase. When a marital crisis occurred, the studio would often dispatch publicists to physically occupy the star's residence, preventing independent reporters from gaining access or conducting unauthorized interviews. Step 2 was the legal coordination. The studio's legal team would select a compliant jurisdiction, frequently utilizing the lax residency laws of Reno, Nevada, or separate legal channels in Mexico, to expedite the divorce before the press could dig into the underlying causes of the separation, such as substance abuse or infidelity. Step 3 was the victim and villain framing. To protect the box office value of the more profitable star, the publicity department would systematically feed negative stories about the other spouse to the wire services, casting them as cold, neglectful, or financially extractive. Step 4 was the immediate redemption arc, where the studio would place the rehabilitated star into a highly publicized charitable campaign or a wholesome new film role within days of the final legal decree, cementing a narrative of resilience and moral recovery. A primary historical case study of this dynamic is the 1936 divorce of Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, the undisputed royalty of early Hollywood. Their estate, Pickfair, had been framed by historical journalism as the ultimate symbol of American marital perfection and domestic stability. When the marriage collapsed due to Fairbanks' highly publicized international infidelities, the potential outcomes threatened the financial foundation of United Artists, the studio they had co-founded. The studio publicity machine worked in tandem with Luella Parsons to manage the visual and textual presentation of the dissolution. The press deliberately minimized the explicit details of the infidelity, shifting the narrative focus to a poignant, dignified separation necessitated by the immense professional pressures of their respective careers. By framing the divorce as a tragic but mutual sacrifice for their art, journalism protected the economic value of the Pickford and Fairbanks back catalogs, demonstrating that the financial incentives of the media and the entertainment industry were completely aligned. However, when a public figure refused to cooperate with the studio's publicity infrastructure, the potential outcomes were catastrophic. Consider the case study of Rita Hayworth during her highly turbulent 1951 separation from Prince Ali Khan. Hayworth, a premier star for Columbia Pictures, operated outside the traditional boundaries of studio control during this period, traveling extensively through Europe and attracting the attention of independent international photojournalists. Because Columbia Pictures could not deploy its standard containment playbook, the American press shifted from protective adoration to aggressive moral condemnation. Columnists like Hedda Hopper printed highly critical accounts of Hayworth's parenting, her financial expenditures, and her nomadic lifestyle, utilizing the divorce journey as a moral lesson regarding the dangers of feminine independence and Hollywood excess. This case study underscores how historical journalism served as an enforcement mechanism for traditional societal norms. If a star submitted to the studio's management, their divorce was presented as a dignified tragedy, but if they resisted, it was weaponized as a public execution of their character. The structural mechanics of this era reveal that the apparent cleanliness or restraint of mid-century journalism was not the product of superior ethical standards, but rather the result of total corporate censorship and monopolistic control over the distribution of information. The public did not receive objective news about the marital journeys of their icons. They received highly polished, serialized corporate communications designed to maintain consumer confidence in the Hollywood product. But as the 1950s drew to a close, a series of antitrust lawsuits shattered the studio system, forcing monopolies to divest from their theater chains and relinquishing their total control over the talent. Simultaneously, the rapid rise of a new broadcast medium began to enter millions of American living rooms, threatening the dominance of the print press entirely. What happened when the corporate shield of the studio publicity department was permanently dissolved, leaving public figures entirely exposed to an independent, decentralized press network? What occurred when journalism shifted away from the managed, typed column and moved toward the immediate, raw and visual medium of live television reporting? In the next part of this masterclass, we will analyze the post-war breakdown of media deference, exploring how the rise of television news and independent investigative reporting transformed the political and cultural stakes of public divorce, turning the private lives of Washington elites into a high-definition battleground for the soul of the American electorate. This post-war breakdown of media deference manifested most visibly through the technological integration of television into the American domestic space. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, the physical presence of the television set grew from a luxury novelty to a ubiquitous household fixture, fundamentally altering how the public processed information. This technological shift coincided with a structural transition within Washington newsrooms. For the first half of the 20th century, an unspoken gentleman's agreement dictated that the private lives of political figures were strictly off-limits, unless they directly impacted national security or the execution of official duties. Print journalists routinely witnessed the extramarital affairs and marital discord of presidents, senators, and cabinet members, yet they chose to omit these realities from their typewritten dispatches. The rationale was rooted in a shared elite culture where reporters and politicians frequented the same private clubs, shared the same social circles, and viewed the protection of institutional dignity as a civic necessity. However, the financial and operational incentives of television news rapidly eroded this protective shield. Television required compelling visual assets, raw human emotion, and dynamic narrative conflict to capture the attention of primetime audiences and satisfy commercial sponsors. The introduction of portable 16mm film cameras, such as the CP16, equipped with synchronous sound capabilities, allowed news crews to leave the static environment of the press room and pursue public figures into the open air. Furthermore, when networks expanded their nightly national news broadcasts from 15 minutes to 30 minutes in the early 1960s, editorial teams faced an urgent structural requirement to fill this newly created airtime with high-impact, dramatic content. The private domestic crises of public figures offered the perfect solution, converting dry political reporting into an ongoing, highly visual human drama. Imagine a scenario in the current year of 2026 where a prominent United States senator named David Vance undergoes a highly volatile divorce. Instead of modern digital publications relying on leaked text messages or social media posts, imagine if regional television networks began deploying advanced thermal imaging and spatial audio arrays outside the senator's private residence, capturing the precise acoustic waves of domestic arguments through closed windows and broadcasting the reconstructed audio streams on the evening news under the guise of investigating emotional fitness for office. This level of technological escalation and invasive surveillance is the precise 2026 equivalent to what mid-century politicians faced when television news crews first realized they could use high-powered telephoto lenses and mobile audio gear to capture the raw, unpolished moments of political figures navigating personal family breakdowns. To understand the step-by-step journalistic execution of this new visual reality, one must analyze the extensive historical case studies surrounding New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller between 1961 and 1963. When Rockefeller announced his divorce from his wife of more than 3 decades, Mary Todd Hunter Clark, in November 1961, the print press handled the initial announcement with relative restraint, printing official press releases that emphasized a mutual, amicable separation. However, the true journalistic paradigm shift occurred in May 1963, when Rockefeller married Margaretta Happy Murphy, a woman who had recently divorced her own husband and relinquished legal custody of her 4 minor children to do so. The television networks quickly realized that the Rockefeller remarriage offered an unprecedented opportunity to test the boundaries of modern political reporting. The journalistic playbook was executed through a series of tactical escalations. Step 1 involved the deployment of mobile television units directly to the campaign trail. As Rockefeller traveled across the country seeking the 1964 Republican presidential nomination, local and national television correspondents abandoned traditional policy questions regarding fiscal governance or the Cold War. Instead, they stood on windy tarmacs and inside crowded convention halls, thrusting microphones directly into the governor's face to demand immediate justifications for his marital choices. Step 2 was the systematic utilization of public opinion polling data as a primary journalistic narrative. For the first time in historical trends, networks did not just report on the scandal. They used empirical data gathered by organizations like George Gallup to frame the divorce as a quantifiable political catastrophe. Journalists presented viewers with graphic charts showing that Rockefeller's approval rating among Republican voters had plummeted from a dominant 43% down to a mere 30% within weeks of his remarriage. This data-driven reporting transformed the marital separation from a private moral issue into an objective, measurable campaign liability, establishing a historical trend where the press used polling metrics to validate their continuous, invasive coverage of a public figure's domestic life. Step 3 involved the mobilization of religious and civic leaders as on-camera commentators. Television producers realized that by interviewing prominent theologians, pastors, and social conservative advocates who openly condemned Rockefeller's actions as an assault on the sanctity of the American family, the networks could maintain an illusion of objective journalistic distance while simultaneously broadcasting highly sensational, morally charged content. The potential outcomes of this media campaign were devastating for the Rockefeller Organization. The continuous loop of television packages depicting the governor defending his new wife effectively alienated key demographics of the electorate, ultimately allowing Barry Goldwater to secure the nomination and proving that television journalism now possessed the power to mediate presidential politics through the lens of domestic morality. As the 1970s progressed, this media framework faced an entirely new structural reality with the advent of the no-fault divorce revolution. When California became the first state to implement a true no-fault divorce law via the Family Law Act of 1969, signed into law by Governor Ronald Reagan, it triggered a rapid legislative cascade across the United States. Throughout the decade, dozens of states abandoned the traditional legal requirement to prove specific fault, such as adultery or physical cruelty, to secure a marital dissolution. This legal transformation fundamentally altered the journalistic coverage of public figures. The press could no longer rely on the explicit, salacious testimonies of courtroom trials to drive readership. Consequently, historical journalism shifted its focus from the legal mechanics of the courtroom to the broader sociological and psychological implications of marital breakdown. Journalists began utilizing the divorces of public figures as case studies to analyze the changing cultural definitions of marriage, gender roles, and family structures in post-war America. When prominent political figures like Kansas Senator Bob Dole underwent a divorce from his wife, Phyllis Hall, in 1972, the press coverage did not look for a hidden villain or an explicit scandal. Instead, regional and national newspapers analyzed the event through a psychological framework, discussing the immense structural pressures that public service exerts on modern political partnerships. This era of sociological reporting set the stage for an extraordinary historical irony during the 1980 presidential campaign of Ronald Reagan. Reagan was poised to become the first divorced individual to ascend to the presidency of the United States, having dissolved his first marriage to actress Jane Wyman in 1949. The journalistic handling of Reagan's marital history demonstrates a highly sophisticated mastery of image management and media deference. The Reagan Campaign Organization, understanding the visual power of television, systematically countered any potential negative historical reporting by presenting his second marriage to Nancy Reagan as the absolute archetype of the devoted, traditional nuclear family. The mainstream press largely accepted this narrative framing, treating the decades-old divorce from Wyman as a historical footnote rather than an active character flaw. This case study underscores a critical evolution in American journalism. By the early 1980s, the press had become highly receptive to stylized, well-managed public relations campaigns, allowing public figures who possessed superior media literacy to successfully neutralize the potential liabilities of past domestic separations. The structural reality of this mid-century television era proves that as the technological tools of journalism became more immediate and visual, the ability of public figures to maintain private boundaries became increasingly dependent on their capacity to manipulate the media machine itself. The unwritten rules of deference were gone, replaced by a hyper-competitive broadcast marketplace that viewed personal vulnerability as a premium commodity. But as the mid-1980s approached, the monopolistic control of the three major television networks was about to be completely shattered by a massive infrastructure disruption. The introduction of orbital communication satellites and the rapid expansion of cable television networks gave birth to a relentless 24-hour news cycle that never slept, never paused, and possessed an infinite amount of airtime to fill. What happened when the press stopped broadcasting news in discrete morning and evening segments and began delivering live, uninterrupted coverage of public figures around the clock? What occurred when specialized tabloid television programs emerged to merge investigative journalism techniques with the uninhibited sensationalism of the print tabloids? In the next part of this masterclass, we will analyze the dawn of the 24-hour cable news era and the rise of syndicated tabloid television, exploring how the proliferation of satellite technology and competitive audience metrics turned the public divorce journey into a permanent, highly addictive national media ritual. To understand how the proliferation of satellite technology and competitive audience metrics turned the public divorce journey into a permanent, highly addictive national media ritual, one must examine the structural transformation of television infrastructure during the late 1980s. The widespread adoption of Ku-band satellite technology allowed for the deployment of lightweight satellite news gathering trucks. Unlike the older, cumbersome electronic news gathering vehicles that relied on line-of-sight microwave signals, these new satellite units could transmit high-definition video feeds directly to orbital transponders from absolutely anywhere in North America. This technological independence coincided with the rise of institutional syndication and the deregulation of media ownership under the Federal Communications Commission, which created a massive market for non-network, first-run syndicated programming. Newsrooms were no longer constrained by the traditional morning and evening broadcast windows. Instead, specialized entertainment news programs emerged, operating entirely on a business model designed to commodify the private domestic lives of public figures. Programs like A Current Affair, launched by 20th Century Fox in 1986, alongside Inside Edition and Hard Copy, completely bypassed the editorial standards of the big three networks. They operated in a hyper-competitive afternoon and early evening syndication marketplace, where success was measured by minute-by-minute Nielsen rating diaries. To maintain these metrics, producers realized they needed to abandon the passive reporting of public records and instead cultivate a high-velocity, continuous cycle of domestic conflict. Imagine if in the current year of 2026, a high-profile public figure, let us call him Michael Carter, experienced a sudden matrimonial separation, and instead of standard digital media coverage, competing streaming algorithms immediately deployed automated spatial audio capture rigs outside his legal counsel's office, translating every whisper into an interactive, real-time betting market where millions of viewers wagered on the exact percentage of asset distribution. This level of total relentless monetization is the precise 2026 equivalent to what syndicated tabloid television unleashed upon the American public in the early 1990s through the introduction of checkbook journalism. The operational mechanic that drove this era was the formal institutionalization of paying cash for primary source material, a practice traditionally rejected by mainstream news organizations. Tabloid television producers established massive discretionary acquisition budgets, allowing field reporters to open bidding wars for exclusive materials related to a public figure's marital dissolution. Step 1 of this journalistic workflow involved the rapid identification of secondary characters within the divorce ecosystem, such as bodyguard staff, personal assistants, flight attendants, and estranged family members. Step 2 was the financial transaction phase, where these individuals were signed to exclusive non-disclosure and licensing agreements, often receiving payments ranging from $10,000 to $100,000 in exchange for private diaries, photographic negatives, or answering machine cassette tapes. Step 3 was the post-production enhancement, where these raw, legally ambiguous assets were edited using dramatic sound effects, ominous synthesizer soundtracks, and slow-motion visual loops to create a highly theatrical presentation of human heartbreak. The ultimate historical case study of this technological and economic synthesis occurred during the 1990 divorce of Donald and Ivana Trump. This event became a watershed moment for American media, serving as the blueprint for the modern, multi-platform scandal ecosystem. The coverage was not confined to local print broadsheets. It became a national multi-week media event that seamlessly bridged the gap between New York print tabloids, national cable news networks, and syndicated tabloid television shows. The journalistic mechanics deployed during this case study demonstrate how public figures, publicists, and journalists operated in a symbiotic, highly transactional network to manipulate public opinion. The journalistic execution began in February 1990, when veteran Society columnist Liz Smith published an exclusive front-page story in the New York Daily News announcing the separation of the prominent real estate developer and his wife. This initial leak was not an accident of investigative reporting, but a calculated strategic disclosure designed to establish narrative dominance. Within hours, competing publication The New York Post, spearheaded by columnist Cindy Adams, mobilized its resources to present the counter-narrative, effectively transforming the print media of the United States into a proxy battlefield for the two divorcing parties. For nearly 3 consecutive weeks, The New York Post and The New York Daily News dedicated their front pages to the Trump divorce journey, printing explicit details regarding prenuptial agreement modifications, asset valuations of the Mar-a-Lago estate, and accounts of a public confrontation on the ski slopes of Aspen, Colorado, involving Marla Maples. The syndicated tabloid television programs took these print headlines and instantly converted them into daily broadcast assets. Crews from Hard Copy and A Current Affair stood outside the Plaza Hotel in Trump Tower 24 hours a day, utilizing high-powered telephoto lenses to capture every movement of the family members. They interviewed legal experts to break down the complex mechanics of equitable distribution laws under New York domestic relations jurisprudence, transforming a private contract dispute into an accessible, daily masterclass in matrimonial litigation. The potential outcomes of this hyper-focused coverage were carefully monitored by corporate executives. Data from the period reveals that during the peak of the Trump divorce coverage, the daily circulation of the New York Post surged by more than 50,000 copies per day, while the national ratings for syndicated tabloid programs experienced a significant upward trajectory. This confirmed to media conglomerates that a public figure's domestic collapse was the single most profitable narrative structure in the modern marketplace, possessing an infinite capacity to generate consumer engagement. Furthermore, this era marked the moment where cable news networks, specifically CNN, realized that the continuous coverage of a public figure's private life could be used to sustain viewership during non-crisis periods. CNN began broadcasting live updates from the courthouse steps where the legal teams argued over the validity of the post-nuptial agreements. This convergence of high-minded financial journalism and lowbrow tabloid sensationalism created a new hybrid media form, infotainment. The press justified this coverage by arguing that because the public figure had utilized his marital image to secure corporate loans, brand licensing deals, and public trust, the structural disintegration of that marriage was a legitimate business story with profound implications for investors and the broader real estate market. The long-term historical trends initiated by the 1990 tabloid wars permanently altered the relationship between public figures and the legal system. Matrimonial attorneys quickly realized that the 24-hour news cycle could be utilized as an extrajudicial weapon to force favorable settlement terms. By strategically leaking damaging deposition transcripts or financial disclosures to syndicated television reporters at 5 o'clock in the evening, a legal team could inflict immediate, irreversible brand damage on an opposing party before their lawyers could file a motion for a protective seal. The court of public opinion became directly integrated into the formal strategy of family law litigation. The structural reality of this cable and syndication era proved that privacy was no longer a default condition for anyone operating in the public sphere. It was an expensive luxury that required constant legal defense and sophisticated public relations countermeasures. The media had successfully built an industrial apparatus capable of transforming personal misery into a permanent, self-sustaining stream of national entertainment. But as the 20th century drew to a close, an even greater structural disruption was emerging from the research laboratories of global telecommunications firms. The satellite trucks, the syndicated afternoon television schedules, and the physical print columns of New York were about to be bypassed by a decentralized, global network of digital servers that operated without editorial oversight, without geographic limitations, and without any concept of a print deadline. What happened when the gatekeepers of the newsroom were completely eliminated, allowing anonymous internet users to distribute stolen legal files, private video recordings, and unverified rumors directly to millions of desktop computers instantly? How did the birth of the early internet and the rise of digital gossip hubs transform the public divorce journey from a daily television ritual into a permanent, unerasable digital archive? In the next part of this masterclass, we will analyze the dawn of the digital journalism age, exploring how the emergence of the Drudge Report, early internet message boards, and the first celebrity news blogs permanently dismantled the traditional boundaries of privacy, creating an environment where a public figure's marital journey became property of the global digital commons. This digital migration completely redefined the speed and permanence of historical journalism. In the legacy print and broadcast eras, if a public figure managed to suppress a scandalous story through corporate pressure or legal threats, that narrative effectively ceased to exist for the general public. The physical archives of 19th century newspapers were difficult to access, and mid-century television tapes were locked away in secure network vaults. The birth of the World Wide Web dismantled these structural gatekeepers by introducing cheap, decentralized server infrastructure and peer-to-peer data distribution. Information was no longer distributed on a scheduled linear timeline. It became a permanent, non-linear node on a global network. Early digital journalists realized that they did not need the backing of a major media conglomerate to reach a mass audience. They only required an internet connection and a basic content management system to publish raw, unedited court documents directly to the public commons. Let us analyze the operational mechanics of the first digital newsrooms that specialized in the exposure of public figures. Platforms like the Smoking Gun, founded in 1997 by William Bastone, recognized that the true power of digital journalism lay in the presentation of primary source documentation. Instead of summarizing a divorce petition or relying on anonymous gossip columnists, these digital pioneers utilized the newly implemented electronic filing systems of state and federal courts. Reporters would systematically scrape these public databases, download the raw portable document format files, and host them directly on their own servers. The step-by-step workflow of this digital journalism model was simple yet revolutionary. First, the reporter tracked the civil court dockets of specific jurisdictions known for handling celebrity or executive divorces. Second, the moment a new motion was filed, the file was converted into a compressed digital asset. Third, the asset was embedded with hyperlinked text that allowed search engine crawlers to index the specific names within the document. The potential outcomes of this methodology were profound. A public figure's private marital allegations were transformed into indexable, searchable, and unerasable digital data. Imagine if in the current year of 2026, a prominent cultural figure, let us call him Thomas Vance, initiated a complex matrimonial dissolution, and instead of journalists analyzing the legal filings, automated web scraping scripts immediately parsed the court's digital repository, extracted every financial disclosure statement, and auto-generated thousands of hyper-targeted algorithmic articles that were permanently anchored to decentralized cloud storage networks. This model of immediate, immutable distribution is the exact historical transformation that occurred in the early 2000s when the broadsheet gatekeepers lost their monopoly over the curation of public knowledge. To understand the specific structural impact of this digital paradigm, one must examine the 2002 divorce case study of General Electric Chief Executive Officer Jack Welch and his wife, Jane Beasley Welch. Welch was a titan of American industry, celebrated by traditional business journalism as one of the most successful corporate managers in history. When Jane Beasley Welch filed for divorce in a Connecticut court, her legal team included an extraordinarily detailed list of the executive benefits and perks that Welch was scheduled to receive as part of his retirement package from General Electric. In the pre-digital era, these dense legal appendices would have likely remained buried in a physical county courthouse basement, viewed only by a handful of local beat reporters. However, the early digital press intervened. Web platforms obtained the complete, unedited copies of the court filings and published them online, allowing the global financial community to view the exact nature of Welch's corporate compensation. The documents revealed that General Electric was funding an opulent lifestyle for the retired executive, including the full cost of a multi-million-dollar Manhattan apartment, unlimited access to corporate Boeing 737 aircraft, fine dining expenses, and premium sports tickets. The digital dissemination of these files triggered an immediate corporate governance crisis. The Securities and Exchange Commission launched a formal investigation into the disclosure practices of General Electric, and the intense public pressure ultimately forced Welch to voluntarily relinquish tens of millions of dollars in contractual perks. This case study demonstrates how digital matrimonial journalism shifted from simple entertainment into a potent catalyst for regulatory action and corporate accountability. As the digital ecosystem matured into the mid-2000s, the intersection of internet journalism and political divorces reached a definitive climax during the 2004 United States Senate race in Illinois. The campaign featured a high-stakes contest between Democratic candidate Barack Obama and Republican nominee Jack Ryan, a wealthy former investment banker. Years prior, Jack Ryan had undergone a divorce from his wife, the prominent television actress Jeri Ryan, in a California court. Recognizing the potential political implications hidden within the sealed child custody records of that case, a coalition of media entities, including the Chicago Tribune and local television affiliate WLS, initiated a sophisticated legal campaign to force the court to unseal the documents. When the California judge ultimately ruled in favor of the press, the raw custody transcripts were not merely printed in the next morning's newspapers. They were instantaneously uploaded to the internet as downloadable digital files. The documents contained highly explicit, controversial allegations regarding visits to avant-garde clubs in Paris and New York. The speed of the digital blogosphere ensured that within hours of the court's release, the raw text was replicated across thousands of independent political message boards and early blogs. There was no time for the traditional political apparatus to construct a protective public relations shield. The immediate, nationwide saturation of the narrative made Jack Ryan's candidacy completely unviable, forcing his abrupt withdrawal from the race and fundamentally altering the trajectory of modern American political history. This historical case study underscores how the digital press could weaponize past domestic legal struggles to instantly reshape electoral dynamics, bypassing the traditional timelines of political reporting. This era also witnessed the institutionalization of the celebrity gossip blog, spearheaded by platforms like Gawker, Perez Hilton, and eventually the launch of TMZ in late 2005 by Harvey Levin, a trained attorney and legal journalist. TMZ fundamentally altered the landscape by combining the aggressive tracking techniques of the traditional paparazzi with the rigorous investigative standards of legal journalism. Levin structured the newsroom around the systematic monitoring of the electronic dockets of the Los Angeles County Superior Court. The blogosphere realized that the public possessed an insatiable appetite for the immediate consumption of high-profile marital discord, and they optimized their publishing schedules to match the real-time updates of the court clerks. They introduced the concept of the live blog, where reporters would update a single web page every few minutes with fresh details from ongoing divorce proceedings. The comment sections of these blogs created an interactive public square where millions of anonymous users could analyze, dissect, and critique the private choices of public figures, establishing a permanent digital archive of public judgment. The economic incentives of these early digital newsrooms were entirely dependent on web traffic, page views, and search engine optimization. Unlike the print tabloids that relied on physical distribution networks or the television networks that were constrained by fixed broadcast schedules, digital blogs generated revenue based on the sheer volume of unique visitors they could attract to their pages. This economic reality forced editors to master the technical mechanics of search indexing. When a public figure began a divorce journey, digital journalists did not just write an article. They carefully structured the metadata of the web page, packing the HTML tags with specific keywords, legal terms, and names to ensure maximum visibility on early search platforms like Google and Yahoo. If a user searched for the name of a prominent executive or politician, the top results were no longer their official corporate biographies or legislative achievements, but rather the highly detailed digital archives of their ongoing matrimonial disputes. This permanent visibility meant that the psychological and financial toll of a public separation was extended indefinitely. A public figure could never truly move past the legal crisis, as the digital record remained completely static and easily accessible to any individual with an internet connection anywhere on the planet. The structural reality of this early digital era proved that the gatekeepers of old media had been permanently bypassed by a decentralized network that valued speed, raw documentation, and search visibility above all else. The private collapses of the elite were no longer temporary spectacles fading from the public consciousness. They were permanent, architectural components of the global internet infrastructure. But as the first decade of the 21st century drew to a close, a new technological disruption was quietly taking shape that would transition the digital press away from stationary desktop computers and directly into the pockets of the global population. The launch of the modern smartphone and the explosive growth of interconnected social media networks were about to eliminate the final temporal delays between private action and public consumption. What happened when the public figures themselves lost control over their own public accounts, using weaponized live tweeting to bypass both traditional publicists and digital journalists entirely? How did the emergence of algorithmically driven feeds transform the public divorce journey into a real-time, crowdsourced narrative where the boundaries between reality, performance, and digital warfare were permanently erased? In the next part of this masterclass, we will step into the hyperconnected era of smartphone journalism and social media dominance, analyzing how the proliferation of mobile applications, instant notifications, and weaponized algorithms transformed public matrimonial separation into a high-velocity, interactive visual theater that captured the global consciousness in real time. The infrastructure of smartphone technology completely dissolved the spatial gap between the consumer and the crisis. Push notifications turned every individual handheld device into a direct terminal for real-time psychological distribution, replacing the morning paper and the evening broadcast with a continuous, hyper-accelerated stream of alerts. This structural shift completely upended how historical trends in journalism functioned. No longer did newsrooms have hours to verify, edit, and format content before presenting it to an audience. In the smartphone era, the news cycle contracted to fractions of a second. This hypervelocity marketplace rewarded immediate engagement above accuracy, forcing traditional publications to adopt the aggressive tactics of social media algorithms to maintain market share. Imagine a scenario in the current year of 2026 where a prominent technology executive named Mark Jenkins undergoes a sudden marital breakdown. Instead of waiting for a traditional reporter to discover the civil court filings, his spouse bypasses the journalistic infrastructure entirely by broadcasting a series of live, unfiltered video updates directly from inside their shared residence to an audience of millions. Within minutes, decentralized internet communities analyze every frame of the video, cross-referencing background objects and tracking digital footprints to construct a highly volatile public narrative. Before the corporate public relations department can draft an official statement, the automated sentiment analysis engines of major financial platforms detect the viral surge, causing institutional trading bots to dump the company stock and wiping out hundreds of millions of dollars in market value. This hypothetical scenario illustrates the modern reality where public figures are completely stripped of the protection of time, and where a private separation can instantly mutate into a macroeconomic crisis through the mechanism of interconnected social platforms. To understand the step-by-step evolution of this direct-to-consumer media warfare, one must analyze the historic 2019 case study involving Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and Mackenzie Scott. This event serves as a foundational example of a public figure executing a preemptive strike to neutralize the traditional tabloid press. In January 2019, Bezos utilized his personal account on the social platform Twitter to publish a coordinated statement announcing the end of their 25-year marriage. This move was a calculated operational maneuver designed to intercept an impending exposé by the National Enquirer, a print tabloid that had spent months executing a high-stakes surveillance operation. The tabloid had intercepted private text messages, tracked travel schedules, and acquired photographic evidence of an extramarital relationship. The journalistic methodology deployed by the National Enquirer represented the final peak of legacy tabloid aggression, relying on high-capital checkbook tactics and physical stakeouts. However, the digital landscape allowed Bezos to execute a counter-strategy that completely shifted the power dynamics. Weeks after the initial announcement, Bezos published an independent, detailed essay on the digital platform Medium, exposing the private communications and alleged extortion tactics of the tabloid's parent company. By publishing the raw, unedited text of the corporate threats directly to the public commons, Bezos bypassed the entire journalistic apparatus. This case study demonstrates a critical historical shift. Public figures with immense economic resources could now utilize digital distribution networks to unmask the internal operational methods of publishers, converting an existential personal crisis into a profound public examination of journalistic ethics and privacy violations. The structural reality of media manipulation shifted even further from traditional newsrooms with the emergence of the 2021 and 2022 marital dissolution between Kanye West and Kim Kardashian. This case study highlights the complete democratization and weaponization of social media feeds as primary judicial instruments. West abandoned the conventional strategy of utilizing crisis management publicists to issue polished statements through mainstream outlets like People magazine. Instead, he utilized his personal Instagram account as a direct, unedited tactical weapon, publishing real-time screenshots of private text messages from his spouse, legal counsel, and custody coordinators. The traditional entertainment press found themselves completely displaced from their historic role as investigative gatekeepers. Mainstream journalists were reduced to passive aggregators, merely transcribing, capturing, and republishing social media updates as they appeared on their smartphone screens. The structural pacing of this coverage was dictated entirely by the posting frequency of the public figure. This created a continuous loop of high-affinity content that kept audiences in a permanent state of psychological engagement. The potential outcomes of this phenomenon were deeply disruptive to the formal legal system. The immediate public exposure of private custody negotiations and legal strategies forced the matrimonial attorneys to constantly adjust their formal court filings in response to the viral social media sentiment of the hour. The ultimate culmination of this algorithmically driven media landscape occurred during the 2022 Virginia legal trial between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. While the lawsuit technically centered on defamation claims rather than a formal divorce proceeding, the underlying narrative was an exhaustive, retrospective cross-examination of their complete marital collapse. This event became the most watched domestic dispute in human history, serving as a watershed moment where traditional journalistic standards were completely overwhelmed by crowdsourced, engagement-driven content creation. The operational execution of this media phenomenon was driven by the algorithmic architecture of platforms like TikTok and YouTube. The court permitted a live television feed from inside the room, providing a continuous stream of raw audio and high-definition video assets. Independent content creators, legal commentators, and everyday social media users seized these assets, using digital editing software to slice the testimonies into highly compressed video clips. These creators realized that the platform's recommendation algorithms aggressively promoted content that generated strong emotional reactions, such as anger, mockery, or intense sympathy. Consequently, the public did not consume the trial through balanced, comprehensive journalistic reports. Instead, they experienced it through an optimized sequence of short-form videos featuring dramatic musical overlays, sound effects, and highly biased textual commentary. Data gathered during this period indicates that hashtags associated with the trial generated tens of billions of views within a 6-week window, completely outperforming the total audience metrics of all major television news networks combined. This created a profound structural reality where the court of public opinion was managed entirely by decentralized, financially motivated internet creators who optimized their content for maximum algorithmic amplification, permanently redefining how modern society processes the domestic breakdowns of public figures. The long-term historical trends solidified by these case studies prove that the modern media ecosystem has evolved into a hyper-connected visual theater, where the traditional concept of an objective reporter has been largely marginalized. Public figures are caught in a dual-front conflict, fighting both the predatory surveillance of legacy media remnants and the uninhibited, chaotic velocity of decentralized online communities. Every text message, every private recording, and every emotional outburst is treated as a premium asset to be indexed, distributed, and monetized by platforms designed to maximize user retention at all costs. But as we stand in the current reality of the media landscape, a final, even more radical shift is beginning to manifest within the digital infrastructure. The tools of absolute narrative control and synthetic production are advancing at an exponential rate, threatening to dissolve the very concept of verifiable historical documentation. What happens when the public figures themselves can no longer distinguish between genuine leaks and completely fabricated deepfakes of their private lives? What occurs when the algorithms stop merely distributing the scandal and begin predictively generating the controversy to satisfy the financial demands of the platform networks? In the final part of this masterclass, we will synthesize nearly 2 centuries of media evolution, analyzing the current state of digital warfare, the emergence of synthetic media, and the ultimate survival strategies deployed by modern public figures to protect their human dignity and institutional survival within the absolute panopticon of the 21st century press. The absolute panopticon of the 21st century press requires a complete conceptual reimagining of public relations and legal defense. As we evaluate the media ecosystem in the current year of 2026, the boundaries between human journalism and automated algorithmic generation have completely collapsed. Public figures entering a divorce journey are no longer merely fighting a hostile reporter or a predatory paparazzi network. They are fighting an integrated, self-optimizing digital infrastructure that synthesizes historical trends in journalism with predictive data modeling. The emergence of highly sophisticated synthetic media tools means that the raw evidence introduced in modern matrimonial litigation can be instantly extracted, manipulated, and rebroadcast as entirely fabricated visual or auditory events. This is the culmination of a 200-year evolution that began with the manual print shops of the 19th century and has arrived at a state of total, continuous narrative warfare. To understand the exact mechanics of this modern digital warfare, consider an imagine-if scenario occurring in 2026. Imagine if a prominent United States corporate executive named Robert Vance becomes involved in a highly contentious separation from his spouse. In this contemporary environment, an adversarial entity doesn't need to wait for a leaked document from a courthouse clerk. Instead, they utilize advanced generative audio algorithms trained on hundreds of hours of Vance's public speeches and corporate presentations to create a hyper-realistic, completely synthetic audio recording of a private domestic dispute. In this fabricated recording, the synthetic voice of Vance appears to confess to massive financial improprieties and severe marital misconduct. Within milliseconds of being uploaded to an anonymous offshore digital forum, the audio is detected by automated scraping networks. It is instantly amplified across thousands of independent media feeds, triggering an automated drop in his company's stock value and forcing a public regulatory inquiry before human forensic experts can even analyze the file to prove its synthetic nature. This scenario outlines the terrifying reality facing modern public figures. Modern information dissemination has completely outpaced the human capacity for verification, turning unverified synthetic narratives into functional economic and legal realities. Faced with this absolute exposure, the survival strategies deployed by modern public figures have undergone a radical structural evolution. The traditional public relations playbook of issuing a late-night press release or arranging a managed interview with a friendly publication is completely obsolete. Today, the preservation of institutional survival and personal dignity requires the implementation of a highly sophisticated, multi-layered defensive matrix. Let us dissect the specific step-by-step operational playbook utilized by top-tier legal and crisis management professionals in 2026 to safeguard a public figure's divorce journey. Step 1 is the execution of preemptive digital containment and forensic asset tracking. Months before a formal divorce petition is filed in any judicial jurisdiction, specialized cybersecurity firms are embedded within the public figure's inner circle. These firms perform a comprehensive audit of all digital communication vectors, establishing end-to-end encrypted repositories for all personal data. More importantly, they implement advanced cryptographic watermarking on all authentic family communications, photos, and videos. This digital watermark serves as an immutable forensic signature. If a private asset is later leaked or altered by a hostile entity during the legal proceedings, the public figure's team can instantaneously verify its authenticity or prove its manipulation to the press using public blockchain verification ledgers. Step 2 involves the complete restructuring of non-disclosure agreements to account for the modern algorithmic landscape. In historical trends, a standard non-disclosure agreement simply barred an employee or associate from speaking to journalists or publishing a memoir. In 2026, these legal contracts are engineered with microscopic precision. They explicitly prohibit the utilization of any private data, text messages, vocal recordings, or biometric likenesses for the purpose of training machine learning models or generating synthetic content. The potential outcomes of violating these contemporary contracts include catastrophic liquidated damages and immediate corporate liquidations, establishing an ironclad financial barrier that prevents domestic staff, security personnel, and secondary corporate associates from monetizing their proximity to the marital collapse. Step 3 is the execution of algorithmic narrative poisoning, a sophisticated search engine optimization strategy designed to neutralize the visibility of scandalous headlines. When a public figure's legal team anticipates the filing of a highly damaging matrimonial motion, they don't try to suppress the story directly. Instead, they deploy network clusters to flood the digital commons with massive volumes of high authority, neutral or positive content associated with the public figure's name. By dominating the indexing parameters of major search engine web crawlers with complex technical articles, philanthropic announcements, and academic white papers, the team effectively forces the incoming scandalous articles down to the second or third pages of search results. Because data indicates that less than 5% of digital users look past the first page of search metrics, this strategy successfully isolates the crisis, preventing it from achieving the viral velocity required to cause permanent institutional damage. The historical continuity of this entire 10-part masterclass demonstrates that while the technological instruments of delivery have evolved from heavy rag paper to satellite transponders and decentralized server networks, the core psychological drivers of public consumption remain completely static. When Charles Hammond weaponized the administrative bigamy of Rachel Jackson in 1828, he was utilizing the exact same narrative framework deployed by the creators of TikTok trends during the 2022 Depp and Heard trial. The press has consistently discovered that the public dismantling of a high-profile relationship serves as a highly lucrative engine for media profit, a mirror for societal anxieties, and an unmatched tool for political displacement. The public figure's domestic life remains the ultimate battleground where a society debates its own moral values, class privileges, and definition of truth. By analyzing this comprehensive historical trajectory, from the partisan broadsheets of the Gilded Age to the hyperconnected visual theater of the 21st century, audiences can finally develop the critical media literacy required to safely navigate the modern information landscape. Understanding these case studies allows individuals to look past the immediate emotional hook of a viral headline and recognize the underlying corporate incentives, the strategic legal maneuvers, and the technological manipulation shaping the narrative. This analytical framework solves the problem of media vulnerability, transforming the passive consumer into a sophisticated analyst of public discourse. As we bring this deep dive masterclass to a close, we must recognize that the evolution of media surveillance does not stop at the boundaries of family law. The mechanisms of exposure perfected during the history of public divorces are already being adapted to target entirely new sectors of human civilization. In our upcoming investigative masterclass series, we will peel back the layer on an entirely different kind of high-stakes media manipulation, exploring how hidden economic cartels and international intelligence networks systematically utilize the exact same sensationalized journalistic playbooks to orchestrate the public downfalls of global financial systems and sovereign institutions. Prepare your analytical tools, because the war for narrative dominance is about to move from the domestic chamber directly into the global economic arena.